I felt like it was this panic that something was going to happen to her, and that it's going to happen on my watch. And it was just like it took its toll physically. Just I was so stressed, and it was just this sheer panic of like, I need to help her get through this. I need to help fix this. And in hindsight, maybe it wasn't, I mean, obviously it wasn't healthy, but maybe there were healthier ways I could have been there for her instead of the way that I was. But I did the best I could with what I had.
Did you find there were like triggers?
Welcome to the Becoming Sound podcast, where we dive into the tough stuff and try to find the humor in the hot mess of being an adult child. Join me as we peel back the layers on growing up in dysfunction, navigating substance abuse, mental health challenges, and everything in between.
Hi, everybody. This is the Becoming Sound podcast. I'm Krista, your host, and this is our little series, Oversharing with Shannon, which is
Me.
Shannon.
Hi.
And so today we're going to talk about parenting, and which is kind of a loaded topic, I realize. Might get a little heavy, and that's okay. But we're going to talk about how we parented and why we did the things we did, and how we were parented and how that affected our parenting styles and our skills as we went through that part of our lives. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I think we're going to start with how we were parented. So for me, my parents were going through their stuff. They were not emotionally there for us as kids. I think that my mom for sure was just trying to keep her own head above water. I had everything we needed when we were growing up. We were clothed and fed and taken care of that way. And yes, there were some great times. And I remember, my mom teaching me things and my dad teaching me things, definitely skills I learned along the way. But there was a lot of chaos and there was a lot of stuff, a lot of trauma. And so that obviously affects you as a kid. And then when you get older and you start going through those years and you become a parent yourself, unbeknownst to you, you've carried all of those characteristics and that programming and those patterns with you. And then you just basically vomit them out onto your children. And so, that's fun.
Yeah.
So, what was it like for you, Sean?
I think really similar. I
Yeah.
think that, last time, the time that we were sort of talking about our introductions, and I think that was the last episode. We're sort of saying a little bit about ourselves. I found it such a landmine of stuff. It was like a landmine, like trying to I don't want to hurt anyone. I don't want to say this. I don't want to say that. And I'm still not going to get into details. But one thing that is a big theme in my life as a child and growing up into an adult child, I guess, of dysfunction is this theme of abandonment. And there's lots of reasons for that. And there's some experiences that I had that really, I guess, informed me. And I said last time, like, just sort of told me about me, like what that must mean about myself. And it's funny that I didn't really even know that was part of what's going on with me until later in life.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those things I didn't even really remember until later. And then I was like, okay, this is all starting to make sense, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So when I had kids, I definitely brought that in as a parent. One thing I think we both probably did is I made like a concerted effort to try, not that my upbringing was horrible, because it was not horrible, but it had its moments.
Yeah.
And I really tried to do things different. I think we all do that, right? I tried to do things differently from what I experienced growing up, and I tried to be present, because I don't think my parents were really present as parents. They were there, obviously, but I think they were, like you said, stuck in their own stuff and dealing with their own things. And I think that was the generation also. So I really tried to be different. I tried to um, just, I guess, show up for my kids in a different way. And I think I was pretty successful in that. Like, I think, my kids and I are really close. And I think that's probably why I really did make an effort. Their whole upbringing to make sure we're close, to make sure we communicate, to make sure I know what's going on with them. But that theme of, yeah, right, the theme of the abandonment, I didn't realize how much that trickled into my parenting until the shit hit the fan a little bit. You know, my kids have both been through their share of stuff, which of course I'm not going to get into. Those aren't my stories to tell. But it started more with my daughter, you know, at the end of high school and her, you know, years following high school. She had been through it. She had some stuff that happened with her, and I really did my best to support her and to be there for her. And I could see that it was really scary, you know, to watch as a mom. But I did my best to sort of be there. But you know, some of this stuff was really, really heavy. And, you know, and it's hard to watch your kids as they are going through this. And also because of the stuff that they've been carrying and haven't quite dealt with yet,
Mm-hmm.
the types of people that they allow into their lives because, you know, they're not in a good place. And so then they allow these people in that I don't think were the best influences. And well, I mean, that's an understatement.
Yeah.
Not great people. And that was just so hard to watch. And
Mm-hmm.
Krista and I have had these conversations about that time. And, you know, I know for you, you wonder if it was about control, like I was trying to control things in how much I was helping and trying to direct things. And I don't feel like it was control. I really feel like it was this panic in me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I felt like it was this panic that something was going to happen to her and that it's going to happen on my watch. And it was just like it took its toll physically. Just I was so stressed and it was just this sheer panic of like I need to help her get through this. I need to help fix this. And in hindsight, maybe it wasn't, you know, I mean, obviously it wasn't healthy, but maybe there were healthier ways I could have been there for her instead of the way that I was. But I did the best I could with what I had, you
Did
know.
you find there were like triggers? Like it was triggering you in some ways?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It triggered actually this abandonment response,
Mm-hmm.
this trauma response in me.
Yeah.
Not that I thought, well, she's just going to up and leave me. It was like something's going to happen to her and I'm not going to have her anymore. And, um, and then my son went through some mental health stuff also. And, you know, I feel like I'm better at it with him because I sort of been through the trenches with her.
Yeah.
But you know, there's still this part of me, like when I see that he's struggling, it's this worry, right? That I don't want to lose him. I can't lose him. And I was trying to figure out like what is that, right? Like what is that about?
Mm-hmm.
Like because it was such a scary time. There was like a few years of a span where it was really scary. And I think about like what was it really about? Like my response to that, my trauma response to it. And I keep coming back to that same abandonment thing. And then I had this sort of when you and I were talking about what kind of things could we talk about during, you know, these types of episodes that we're going to have. And and then I had this kind of like early morning, like 6 a.m. kind of epiphany.
Therapy session?
Well, I often do that, right?
Your
Like
own therapy
I
session
wake
with
up
the
and I don't, yeah,
pen to paper, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And I had this moment of like, that's what it is. And I was trying to kind of connect the dots to figure out what is it? What was the common thread and all of that? So anyway, I woke up one morning, like early before my alarm, and it must have been on my mind. I don't know if I was dreaming about it or what. And it was like, it's like bingo, like I hit it and I had to like write it down quick.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, okay, what is that state of panic about?
Yeah.
The obviously we all worry about losing our kids. We all worry that something's going to
Yeah.
happen to them. But for me, it was like such a heightened
Yeah. Like
worry,
over the top.
over the top worry, stress that I was going to do friggin' anything
Yeah.
I could to like pull them out of that,
Yeah. Like
you
even
know?
abandoning yourself
Uh,
to do that.
Not absolutely abandoning
Yeah.
myself, absolutely abandoning my mental health, my physical health, all of it because I was just so, and it wasn't about being a martyr or like, oh, look at me, I'm the mom who's like, you know, doing it wasn't even that. It was just out of total panic mode.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was writing about it because I was like, and what is that? I said, I feel like I've been circling the answer to that for so long and it just hit me, the words to explain it. It's because deep down, I know that they're the only two people in the whole world who I trust will never leave me.
Mm.
And for most people, you know, it's like, I know they're never going to stop loving me. Like, these are the only two people. And for most people, I know that that should include at least their parents, their siblings. For me, it doesn't. And like,
Right.
there's lots of reasons for that.
Yeah.
I know, like, listen, I know my parents love me. I know my brother loves me. I know you love me. I know I've got people in my circle that, you know, that care about me and care about what happens to me. But there's this tiny little wounded girl in me
Mm.
that feels like I'm alone.
Yeah. That's the wound speaking,
Yeah,
right?
it's the wound speaking. And so that wounded girl feels like that my two kids are the only two people in this whole world who love me and who will never leave me.
Mm-hmm. Which
Right?
is such an illusion
I
because
know.
people leave all the time,
I
right?
know. Of course.
But just that level of believing that
Yeah.
it drives your behavior. It was
Yeah.
driving your panic, your sheer like
Totally.
chaos within you.
Totally.
Is that little piece of information, which is really an illusion,
Yeah.
was driving this
Yeah.
huge state.
This state of
Yeah.
like just absolute white panic. And I said, um, the love of my children, I said that I trust because there's part of me that doesn't trust the love of other people, right? So the idea of them leaving me, I know that if that happened, I would be absolutely and utterly alone in this world because they're the only ones who truly love me.
Mm-hmm.
Which I know, like, I already know,
Yeah,
right? I already know that's
Yeah.
not true. But when I'm trying to understand what that panic is about,
Mm-hmm.
that's what it is. Like, if you stripped away everything, if you stripped away, you know, the therapizing and the, you know, I get it all. Of course.
You strip all that
You
away, and
strip
what
it
you're left
away,
with is
and
the
what are you
wound.
left with? You're left with the wound.
Yeah.
You're left with the open, gaping wound of the little girl who feels completely and utterly alone.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I feel like that is how I guided myself through, you know, a lot of the stuff that was happening with my
Mm-hmm.
kids was just that part of me, you know, and it's not healthy. I know that. But
Yeah.
I also feel like I'm better this time around too. Right? So
Well, you've healed more. You
I've
know more.
healed, I know more, I
Yeah.
understand more about mental health. Um, but yeah, during that time, I don't think I understood a lot about it.
Yeah.
And so all of it was just like, you know, a crazy train
Mm-hmm.
that I just couldn't get off, right?
Well, and honestly, there's another layer to that. You want to go really deep.
Yeah,
And it is when you strip all that away, the lack of self love and self worth
yeah,
deep inside isn't there. And so when you think of those people abandoning you, you're not left with anything because you don't have that connection to yourself.
yeah,
Do you know, like most people walk around putting all their joy, their happiness, their sense of being is in someone else. Whether that be our kids, for most moms it is your kids.
mm,
It's that deep level of the lack of self acceptance, self worth, that worthiness piece sits so, so deep within us that we put our own being in someone else. And
yeah,
so, what happens if you don't have that someone? You are literally losing you because
yeah.
you don't have you.
Mhm.
I saw this woman talk about who was it? I think it was Mel Robbins, actually. We were just talking about her.
I
Absolutely
love
love her
her.
podcast. But she was talking to someone else about when you strip all that stuff away, the self love is such a foundational piece. And without that, you really don't have a foundation to love others in the capacity that you deserve and that they deserve. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I love my kids. I would probably throw myself in front of a train for them.
Yeah,
And that's such a deep, deep love. It's like nothing else. But I was at a place in my life too where if you took that away from me, I didn't have anything because I didn't have me. I did
mhm.
not have that deep love and acceptance and worthiness within myself.
Yeah,
So I'm putting all of that in other people, and that happens to be our kids.
yeah,
It's a natural thing to do, and I get that it is also a trauma response. But it is such a disservice to our kids
Yeah.
because when you're acting like that or you're projecting that onto them, you're putting so much on their shoulders. And they in turn are not learning the value of self-love either. They see us, and not saying we're trying to be martyrs, but they see mothers as like these martyrs are trying to be and do all for everybody else, that they are sacrificing their own selves. I know there's a huge abandonment issue there, but there's also a worthiness
Yeah.
issue there. And for me, that's the one piece that I was lacking so much when I was raising kids.
So what was it like for you? Like how did being
Well,
an adult child
you know what?
change
I
your
carried
parenting?
so much of the conditions and paradigms with me into raising kids. I was having a hard time managing my own emotions. My emotional regulation was really poor. So I wasn't able to handle things that were coming up. So I was suppressing things. I was detaching from my emotional house. I was operating in this space of um, really a fight or flight response. So I was always in a trauma response and I didn't realize that. I was able to operate at such heightened levels because I was used to operating in that hypervigilance mode,
Yeah.
that I was actually showing up for my kids in that way. I always said to myself, "Oh, I'm going to parent differently. I'm going to listen to my kids and pay attention and make sure I'm there for them," and all of the stuff that I felt like I didn't receive. And I did receive some of it too. I mean, it wasn't a completely horrible childhood. My parents did the best they could with what they had
Sure.
in the moment, and I fully accept that. Um, but as I moved into, I had my son and he was 4 before the twins were born. And so him and I spent a lot of that time on our own.
Yeah.
And the first part, I was super protective of him, and I felt like I was helicopter parenting a little bit and trying to minimize anything around him and stuff. But he set off triggers in me. His behavior set off triggers in me too, and I didn't realize it. And I thought I was just being short-tempered, or maybe I was yelling a bit too much or whatever. But I wasn't making the connection between what I had brought with me from childhood and how I was behaving with my son. And then I think for me, a big thing is I was always looking for something to fix me, to fix how I felt inside, instead of addressing me. And when the girls came along, I felt like there was a part of me that calmed down and another part of me that the triggers were just left, right, and center. It wasn't until they were probably 2.5, 3, where I felt like my one daughter was sent to me. I truly believe this. I didn't know it in the moment, but I felt like she was sent to me to recognize myself and like see my own behaviors. Um, and honestly, I think kids are sent to us. I think they choose us long before we know. And when I look back now, I realize that my one daughter, all my kids were sent to me for a reason. I could pinpoint different things that they brought out in me, but that moment, I think she was about 2.5, 3 years old, and it was like I was looking in the mirror at myself.
Yeah.
And all of these things were triggering the child in me, and all the trauma responses and all the things that I had been holding in for so long. And she was triggering that in me. And I was like, I didn't know how to handle it. I became very angry with the kids and very short-tempered, and there was a lot of emotions going through, but I wasn't feeling them. I wasn't allowing myself to feel them. The only emotion I was allowing myself to feel was a lot of frustration and anger. And there was a moment where I grabbed her, and I've told this story before in one of my episodes. I grabbed her and I was like holding onto her little arms, and I was looking at her in sheer frustration. She was looking at me like terrified,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden I saw her and I'm like, oh, and I put her down, and I ran outside and I just crumbled,
Yeah.
and I was so upset, and I'm like, instantly, she enabled me to see me. And I was like, wow, you need some help for this crap. Like, you need to get a handle on this anger. Something's going on, and it's not the kids that are causing this. It's me. And so that's the moment that I went to therapy. That's when I went and got help. we did some childhood work and stuff, and I realized that so much of what I went through was coming through in my parenting style. You know, as loving and as much as I wanted to be the best parent until I like started to get curious, until a therapist actually brought it to my attention and helped me see, oh wow, I am operating in the same way that I was parented,
Mm-hmm.
but almost heightened, because I had pushed down so much that everything was coming to the surface all at once. And it's this really heightened state of being just not able to cope. I was overwhelmed and felt like I was on a hamster wheel, and all of these emotions were coming up. So when I went to therapy, I started to understand this. I started to realize this about myself. I started to see things differently. Um, and I was able to show up differently for my kids from that point. There was a lot less yelling. There was more me getting down on their level and addressing things with them, being able to see it from their point of view. That was a technique that a therapist taught me, was if I feel like my emotions are getting heightened and I want to yell at the kids, that she said, I want you to get down on your knees and look them eye to eye and then yell at them. It's completely impossible. I'm just to tell you right now, it is. It humbles you in the moment. So that was a huge technique that I started using, especially with my son at the time. And I could see him in a different light, and I could see he was just being a kid. He was just doing what kids do, you know, and not meaning to get under my skin. It was me that was getting under my skin, right? So that was a huge eye opener for me. That was when I really started learning about myself and what I had been brought up with. It doesn't all come at once, for sure. And I was able to parent a lot differently. I was able to be there more for my kids. Was it perfect? Hell no. But it was a huge step in the right direction. And all the little things that I learned about myself through therapy helped me show up differently for my kids, you know. And yeah, of course, there was some damage done. I try not to beat myself up about that now, because I was doing the best in the moment with what I had. That's just what happened. And I think it helped me navigate their childhood a little bit better, you know. Some of the stuff I kept pushing down. I didn't want to address a lot of what was happening to me, but I was better at parenting, for sure. And I don't know, my kids might tell you different. They might tell you different, but I tried to shelter them more from a lot of the stuff that was going on in the house. I wasn't able to, for sure. A lot of family dynamics going on, a lot between their dad and me. And so, you know, kids feel that. And so, as much as I carried that with me into my adulthood, my kids carried that stuff with them
Totally.
into adulthood. And there's no avoiding that when you live in the circumstances that we did, right?
Yeah.
You know?
You know, as you were talking about sort of when the kids were smaller, when previously, I was talking about sort of that moment of like the epiphany of kind of why am I reacting like this? Like when traumas and when things were happening with my kids when they were a little older. But I don't think I mean, I know this, but again, making connections as you're talking, when my kids were smaller, you know, as I look back, I feel like, you know, I was definitely trying to sort of be everything for everyone and trying to always make special occasions the best Christmas ever, the best Easter ever, you know, and creating memories and all those things. And trying to create an environment at home here where it was different from what I grew up with, and in almost every way I feel like it was. But you know, as you mentioned about sheltering them, like, and you know this, you and I have talked about this, how hyper vigilant I was trying to be the buffer sometimes with my kids. And you know, their dad would sometimes come home in a bad mood, or you know, going through whatever he was going through, and it wasn't my job to be this buffer and be hypervigilant, but I just took that role. Again, where does that come from? Well, it doesn't
We
take,
actually know where all this comes from.
yeah, it
It's
doesn't,
just epiphanies, and you all of a sudden you're like, light bulbs are
wait
going
a
off, right?
second.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I know that I did this and I know that it wasn't healthy, but you know, to also sort of look back at that as like, that wasn't necessarily on him. He didn't come home like throwing things and,
Yeah.
of course not, right? But if he came home in just even the slightest bad mood or feeling slightly disconnected,
Yeah.
I was so hyper vigilant about moods. And it wasn't about him, it was about what I grew up with
Yeah.
and being hyper vigilant at home as a child.
Mhm.
So now I've carried that into my marriage and just being this buffer of, you know what, it's okay. I'll do homework with them tonight. You go ahead.
Mhm.
I'll clean up after dinner. You go relax. You've had a long day. Whatever.
Mhm.
That wasn't about him.
Exactly.
Right? That
Yeah.
wasn't about him, but
Yeah.
as I'm telling this story, it's like I'm telling that through this entirely different lens. That was about me. That was about me wanting everything to be just
Yeah.
okay and smooth and easy and you're sensing that someone's mood is off even slightly, and I was right in there being like, "Okay, yeah, no, it's okay. And trying to manage that.
Yeah.
And so, did I do my kids a disservice by sheltering them from the fact that, people have bad moods and, whatever?
Mhm.
But that wasn't healthy for me either doing that,
Yeah.
right?
No,
Jumping in
it's
and
true.
trying to manage the
Mhm.
climate and
Yeah. Like I said before in one of our last episodes, it's like when I look back on all this stuff and I realize I robbed my kids of learning opportunities, of learning to manage their emotions in that situation because I'm trying, like you said, you're trying to buffer it. I call it control, whatever. Because to me, control was such a bad word all my life. And I had people tell me, you're so controlling, or my kids would say that, you're so controlling, mom, or this or that. And I'm like, that's so bad. But in reality, I was trying to buffer. I was trying to make sure everybody's safe, everybody's emotionally okay. Like, I just thought it was my job to make sure that everybody never had to deal with the kind of pain I was feeling inside or never had to deal with what, to me, that's what control is. It's not that I was trying to be mean or malicious or anything. I was trying to be helpful. I was trying what I thought was helpful. What I thought was being there for my kids. In reality, I'm robbing them of these situations to actually learn and grow and feel the emotion. I was so scared that they were going to feel heartache and feel pain that I was trying to minimize that. And in reality, I wasn't allowing them to learn how to manage pain, learn how to manage their emotions, or learn how to feel their emotions because I had not done that when I was a kid. I had learned not to do that. I had learned that we must be quiet. We must be secretive. We must not blow up and feel our emotions. We must just control the situation. And control is an illusion, but that's what I was trying to do. And when I realized when you're saying that you're trying to step in and buffer everything,
Yeah.
it's like you're buffering your kid's ability to move through that. Do you know what I mean? You're trying to protect them from
Mhm.
feeling it, but you're really robbing them of moving through it and learning how to move through things. And so then when they become young adults and they go through these traumatic things, like you said, your daughter went through this, my daughters too.
Mhm.
You know, my son was like me. He kept everything under the radar and he slipped through the cracks so easily because he became a master at managing his emotions and doing all the things that I had done and taught him to do unknowingly.
Yeah.
That he was the easy one when he was a teenager.
Right.
He was so easy when he was a young adult.
Yeah.
I had missed all the red flags.
Yeah.
I had missed that because he was so skilled at keeping it under wraps.
Yeah.
He was performing like I had performed. I just stepped in and tried to save everybody,
Yeah.
and that's out of love, but it's also out of
It's the trauma
ignorance.
response
It's
too.
out of
Yeah.
ignorance, right? Purely that I was having my own trauma response. I was operating out of that space and I was being triggered by those emotional or mental health situations that I really wasn't able to control. And I would step in and try to control it,
Yeah.
And I know what they needed in the moment was my support and my love, but not to be stepping on their toes and
Yeah.
not to be trying to fix and minimize everything for them. They needed to be able to move through that and feel those things. And instead, I was so terrified of allowing them to feel what I felt. And I want parents to know out there now that if you feel like you're in that situation where you're trying to control so much and you're having these triggers and you just don't know why you're having these big feelings about other people's emotions and you're trying to fix it or try to control it, that it's okay to step back and take a deep breath and say, okay, what am I feeling right now in this? Like, where's my head in this? Aside from what they're going through, what am I feeling? Like, how am I projecting onto them? What am I bringing to this situation? Am I helping find a solution or am I trying to squash it down? Am I trying to like make it go away?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So just to take a deep breath and in the moment, be curious with yourself.
Mhm.
That response now is, how can I get more curious about myself? Like you asking yourself questions like, why am I responding like this? Why am I having that reaction? And it's okay if you initially go to that response and then being able to step back when you figure it out or when you find some clarity on that is going to your kids and saying, you know what? I want to let you know that I responded this way. And that was about me and it wasn't about you. And I need you to know that you can move through this. And it's okay to have your own feelings. It's okay to be in this situation, allow yourself to feel. It's okay to not be okay. You know,
Yeah.
I was so used to that. I was so used to that space of it's not okay to be like, it's not okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
And so I must fix that always within myself. I must appear that I'm okay, even though I'm not. So being able to go back to them and saying, this is what I was feeling in the moment. And I didn't mean to take that away from you and that it's okay. I never had these conversations with my kids until recently, right? Like now I'm able to express myself better, explain how I was feeling in the moment and even just shut my plain mouth and not talk while they're experiencing it, not stepping in and really allowing them to talk about what they're going through, right? It wasn't my first go-to when I was
For sure.
parenting younger people.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was kind of my experience.
That's interesting.
It's
that
a long drawn out experience,
one
but
one man's buffer is another man's
control. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a play on words, but really when you
It's the
peel
same
back
thing.
the layers, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
the bad connotation of that word, it's a hard word to say to yourself sometimes.
Well, even when you and I were talking before about kind of my experience and you bring up control, I'm like, oh no, it wasn't control.
No, let's reframe that.
I still don't know if it was
Yeah.
for some of it, but
In the context of what we think control
it was
is,
trauma for sure.
it is. It's a way to manage the trauma. And I've been told in my life that I'm controlling, and so that's why I use that word.
That is brand new information.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway.
But yeah, that's why I use that word. And I want people to know that it's a word that's used in a really negative connotation. Nobody wants to be labeled controlling.
The other C word.
That's right. But what it really means is that you're just trying to overhelp. You're trying to overfix. You're trying to overmanage it all, not for malicious reasons, but for the simple fact that you feel unsafe inside.
Yeah.
And that you feel like if you can help and fix everybody else, that everything's going to be okay. It is just not the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
It's not the way that happens.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is. It can be a negative word for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I've learned to reframe that in my own head, in my own mind, and understand where I was coming from. So I can give myself a little grace, give myself a little break, right? And not beat myself up about that.
Yeah.
And,
I definitely am working on like that part of it, like stepping back.
Yeah.
And not trying to be the fixer, not trying to just swoop in and save the day.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like I have kind of, that part of me I feel like has translated onto my daughter, like the part of like, okay, well, just like when we were talking about
Mhm.
crisis management and like how we deal with like
Yeah.
big stuff. And I think she's similar to me in that, we have our big one, we have our cry, we have our meltdown,
Yeah.
whatever. And I've said this to her a few different times with a few different situations in the last, year or two. Just like, yeah, it's okay. Like, have your moment, have your
Mhm.
cry, have your fit, have your whatever. When you're done, dry your tears and then figure out, okay, now what's the plan?
Yeah.
Right? It's
How
okay.
can we find
How
solutions?
how can you find us? And I'm going to leave that to you to figure out.
Mhm.
And anything you need me to step in and help with, absolutely.
Yeah.
Whereas the old me would have been like, how can I jump in and fix this?
Yeah.
How can I pay that bill?
This
How
is
can
what
I
you should do. This is what you should do. This is
Right,
what you should
tell
do,
it this
right?
is directing and
Yeah.
managing.
Yeah.
But now it's more like and also it's like I want to show her I trust you. You're an adult. I trust you to figure
Yeah.
this stuff out and you've got great ideas and you're a problem solver.
Yeah.
I'm a problem solver too and like figure it out. And then, chances are it's just one meltdown away from like, well, here's what I'm going to do about that. And she's
Yeah.
like that too. She
Yeah.
she hits the ground running and she's pragmatic and she's just like, well, I guess I'm just going to do this, and here's
Yeah.
what I'm going to do. And I'm like, great. How can I help?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I've definitely adopted that. How can I help? And being more of a support system and not just jumping right in to
That's
try to
right.
manage the situation.
Yeah.
Just letting them know that, look, whatever you got going on, I know that you're going to be okay. I believe in you. I know that you will find a solution. And if you need help or support in any way,
Yes.
you let me know, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm here. I'm your biggest cheerleader. But I'm not going to fix anybody's problems anymore. I want them to know that they can figure their own stuff
Yeah.
out. They don't need someone to swoop in
That's
and
right.
save the day. They
Yeah.
can save their own day,
Yeah.
right? Just like I've can save my own day and I can grow and learn. My kids can do that too, right?
Yeah.
So, and my son has two kids of his own that now he's gonna respond differently.
Yeah.
I watch him and I can't even tell you how proud I am because
Mm.
he is already acting in a different way than he was brought up. And he is using skills that he has learned in his recovery
Yeah.
to parent differently, to listen, to be present. It's phenomenal. And I know my girls will also do the same thing when their time comes, you
So
know.
like they're breaking that. Well,
Yeah,
we're breaking
we're
that chain of
breaking trauma responses and my kids are breaking their own chains too. And
yeah.
so going forward, I know my grandkids are going to be brought up differently.
Yeah.
You know, they're going to have different experiences, healthier experiences, which ultimately that's all we want for our kids, our grandkids. You know, we just
Yeah.
want them to be healthy and happy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's okay to be sad. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to feel all of those emotions that you try to push down all the time.
As a parent.
Yeah.
Yeah,
As a
for
parent
sure.
and as a child, I want my grandkids to know that, you know, when they come to grandma's house and they are having a meltdown, that they can have a meltdown
Yeah.
in
You're
that
not gonna be like,
moment.
shh, 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 it's
Yeah.
okay.
Like
Stop crying. Stop
I'm
crying.
going to grandparent differently than I parented.
Yeah.
And I'm going to let them feel that and move through it and help them come up with their own solutions and their
Mhm.
own resolutions
Put
to their
words to
stuff.
their feelings.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I'm so looking forward to that,
Totally.
you know? I love
Yeah.
it.
That's great.
Yeah. So that's a little bit about us and our parenting stuff. We'd love any feedback that you have, stuff that you recognize and that you're becoming aware of. Anytime we talk about this stuff, it helps other parents. How you're showing up as a person right now is going to be a direct reflection on how you show up as a parent.
Hmm.
Being able to recognize your stuff
Yeah.
beforehand, that just makes everybody better, right?
Totally.
So,
Like, and I always just find it so interesting when like, whenever we have these
mhm.
conversations, I don't think there's been one yet where I haven't come away with like a little bit of a light bulb moment,
Yeah,
which is so weird because you and I have known each other for so long and
I know.
we have these kind of conversations all the time. But like, it's just wild that I'm still like that having a moment of
Yeah,
clarity or like a little
yeah.
epiphany about something.
Well, honestly, I think we'll be doing this for like 10 years and we'll still be having that.
Yeah.
Because if you're not growing. I don't believe we stay stagnant.
Mhm.
And every time you and I have these conversations, or every time I interview someone else, it's like I said to this therapist that I interviewed, I was like, well, thank you for the free therapy
Yeah,
session.
totally.
Because it is. It's like, this is therapy. When you sit down with your
Yeah.
friend, or when you sit down and talk to someone else, and
Yeah.
you're talking about real life stuff, and
Mhm.
you're talking openly and honestly, and you're able to like peel away the barriers that you have, and that wall that you have,
Yeah.
you learn every single time about yourself. It could
Well,
be one sentence that I'm
yeah.
learning about.
I find even because I listen to Becoming Sound every week, and
Yeah.
as I'm getting ready in the morning, I'm always like listening on Monday mornings. But even though I don't have the same experience as a lot of those people, um, I'm always taking something away from
Yeah.
it. There's always something where I feel like I'm hearing myself in that, or whether it's about being a parent or about being an adult child
Yeah.
or just an experience or whatever. It's just, you can always glean something from it. So
Mhm.
I hope people are gleaning from this. I hope,
I
there's
hope so too.
something that we're saying that's resonating with you. And if it is, like, hit her up. Let us know if
Hit
there's
us
something
up.
you want us to talk about, or if there's
Yeah.
something you want us to talk more about.
Yeah.
It'd be
And we'd
interesting
love
to
to
hear
do a
from you guys.
Q&A too. So if you have questions or topics that you want discussed, or even just questions for us to answer, we'd love some feedback, because then we can do like a whole episode on answering people's questions, which
Yeah.
is great. And yeah,
Yeah, that's a great idea.
yeah. So yeah, hit us up with some questions. And if you like this episode, subscribe or follow us on our Apple or Spotify accounts, and share it with a friend if you know someone that would benefit from hearing us blabber on about our stuff.
And on.
Share it with someone. And yeah, stay tuned, and you'll see us soon. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you for joining me today on another episode of Becoming Sound. If this episode resonated with you in some way, please share it with someone you care about. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button. It helps to get this information out to more people who may need it. If you have a sec, I would love a follow on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. While you're there, hit the 5-star rating and give me a review. When you're scrolling, follow me on my social platforms, and I would love to hear your comments and feedback. Have a fabulous day. Lots of love and gratitude from me. Please note, the views, information, and opinions expressed during the Becoming Sound podcast series are solely those of the individuals involved. The content of this podcast is to educate, inform, and for entertainment purposes only. This podcast series and the content presented does not constitute for medical or other professional advice or services. If you are in crisis or in need of help, please contact your medical or professional provider.